I'm here to talk a little bit about the education research I'm doing, and I realized I forgot to put SAM's logo up there. This is in part due to funding I received as the Education Fellow, but this is work I'm doing over at C-Shape, which is on Central Campus, which meets the same standards that we have. It's been the #1 program like our program for the last 50 years or so in higher education research. So why should you care about what I'm talking about? Well, patient care is negatively impacted by a lack of physician diversity. Physicians who come from historically underrepresented groups tend to work at a higher rate in underserved populations. Patients from underserved populations report increased trust with those physicians. And actually, physicians that come from backgrounds like me, the lily white man up here, also report increased ability to talk cross-culturally. So these are all things that make a big difference in our ability to care for our patient population. So the question you need to ask yourself is, does medicine accurately reflect our society and how it's changing? And spoiler alert, the answer is no. If you look at U.S. physicians by race in 2013, you can see a strong predominance of whites, more men than women. But, that includes a lot of old people, the people that are, in charge of things. So maybe that's changing over time. So here's U.S. physicians by graduation year. Well, there is some decrease in the number of white men and increase in the number of white women, and there's a transient increase in medical graduates from Asian backgrounds, and we can talk about why there's a little decrease at a different thing. But you'll notice all the other groups pretty much are flatlined down at the very bottom. Now, maybe that's because those groups aren't increasing in our country and that this is an accurate representation of what our country really looks like. Well, we all know that's not true as well. And so you can see how we're having a shifting demographic in the United States, this is from the U.S. Census, that our medical school graduates aren't really reflecting. So there's a problem there. But EM, there's probably not a problem with EM. I mean, it's just the problem with people coming into medical school. Well, no, not true either, unfortunately. So if you look, we're still, EM is in the green line, so we're more white people, and Hispanics, not so great. Pretty much any underrepresented population that we take care of is not reflected by our physician group. And don't worry, we're also terrible on gender diversity as well. We are way overrepresented by men. So our EM group looks a lot like this guy, which is not what our country is continuing to look like. So what are we going to do about it? Well, as somebody who's an education policy guy, I'm going to look at how we're arriving at this problem. How are we getting to a place where our physicians are predominantly white men, and especially in our specialty, one that is dedicated to serving underserved populations. Now, some of you may say, well, the problem lies down here in the K through 16. And that is in some cases true. But unfortunately, that's a hard place to study because while I use pipeline, that's actually been kind of pushed out of the education literature because there's so many ins and outs, it's very hard to measure how people are coming in and out. And as the residents may argue, I actually am a physician, and so therefore I want to focus on the parts of the care that we can provide. Now in medical education, we have a very controlled pipeline. People don't enter from outside of medical school in the middle of medical school. They don't transfer in, and once we have you, you are trapped. You can't get out of this box. There are a few people that enter from outside the country from our American medical school, and a few people who leave residency and leave clinical work. But for the most part, we don't have people that didn't train in medicine entering at the residency level either. So it's a very controlled group. And so you can actually know whatever we have at the inputs through is going to be what we have the outputs. So if we want to make a change, we have to understand this process and see if we can make a change at medical school. So what I'm studying here, my PhD, is how does this entering career interest, what we all decided we wanted to be when we started medical school, get modulated through medical school to where we end up. So all the people that wanted to come in and be primary care physicians, how they all ended up as dermatologists. And because I'm an education guy, which means that I'm a soft sciences guy, I have a conceptual framework. This is a bounded rationality model which says people generally act rational. They maximize the things they care most about, and they try to minimize the things they don't care about. But our ability to do that is actually limited by a number of factors, including our ability to gain information and the effect of society on what we think is important. So how do we define merit? How do we define what is important to us from others, like our family, like our classmates, like our mentors, and like those all around? So there's a lot of things going on here, but why that's here is because it helps me to determine what are the factors we should be considering in this model. So the initial hypothesis in this part of my dissertation, we're looking at both replicating what's been done before and then looking for new changes. So in the past, looking at career interests has really been dominated by survey-based research. So I ask you, after you've chosen to become an emergency physician, why? And the thing that most commonly comes back is lifestyle. I would like to not be in the hospital all the time, and I would like to make more money than pediatricians. Sorry, PGM folks. My hypothesis is that females and students from underrepresented in minority medicine, or underrepresented in medicine applicants will have a lower likelihood of applying to emergency medicine. And the reason I have that hypothesis is I'm looking at who is in our specialty. The thing that I'm most interested in is something called a cooling out, which comes from a higher education idea of when you get into the academy, you're told through a non-verbal, sometimes hidden curriculum that some things are for you and some things are not for you. So it originally was described as for people that weren't going to get through college, a gentle way, kind of a paternalistic way of convincing them, maybe school isn't for you. But it's become more consistent with the cooling out of students from underrepresented backgrounds to lower their expectations, to lower their aspirations, and to be told they don't fit here. And that is the main reason I think we have issues in our specialty. So how am I doing that? Well, after about 2 years of trying, I was able to get the AAMC to give me 5 years worth of data of every student who went through the pipeline from 2005 to 2010 as an ARIS year. I got MBME to give me their step scores and the AMA master file, which includes where they practiced. So that's about 50,000 students in and pretty much the entire population of everyone that went through our medical education pipeline at that point in time. And analytically, we're going to look at it in a few different ways, some of which are still kind of being done right now. But I'm a big logistic regression guy. I'm also going to do a cluster analysis, a dominance analysis, and a panel data fixed effects model, which sometimes these are similar terms that we use in science in different ways. That's looking at a time-based change in model. So when I was starting out to look at this, I took a look at the literature and I took a look at that conceptual framework and said, what are the things that seem to matter most? Well, demographics, because that's something I really care about. I had like 6 slides about how we don't represent society. And then attitudes. You know, the things that have been typically what we've looked at when we've looked at who's going to be EM physicians. And then I thought about, well, you know, if you have a ton of money, maybe you're going to want to go be a dermatologist, make a little more money. And then I wanted to control for academic ability. So this idea that people aren't going into EM because perhaps they don't have good enough board scores, they don't have good enough grades, or they're not competitive. Those are important controls. And then finally, what other things do they do in medicine? So, you know, are they research active? Do they have AOA? Do they feel confident in their choice, which is something that goes into that self-efficacy, which was one of those circles that I'm sure you've all committed to memory. And then a desire to practice in underserved populations. And so I ran specific submodels that looked at all these things and then dropped things that no longer provided additional information. And then I stepwise added each submodel in together, making sure that the model stayed significant. You'll see that there's a big drop off here because of the surveys. The AAMC changed some of their survey questions, including work-life balance was recoded in a different way, and so lost a number of people there, but still more than enough power. And so this is the overall model that it created, but that's a lot of things, and I want to focus on just a few. All those things, all those are significant things that predict coming into emergency medicine, and still controlling for those things. Women are significantly less likely to apply to EM. Students from underrepresented backgrounds are still less likely to provide to EM. Work-life balance, the thing that we've always attributed to why they're going in, is very important, but doesn't explain those things. And neither does a desire to practice with underserved populations. So what this is implying is that everything that we understand to predict where people are going to choose a specialty, even including all those things, we still have an issue as a specialty of recruiting these groups. I talked about a dominance analysis. This looks at actually what is the most powerful factors in determining the outcome we're studying. And thankfully, work-life balance is number 1, not number 15. And these are a little bit smaller, underserved populations, MCAT, mentorship, all are important. Gender and URM are lower, so thankfully, they are not the primary drivers of what we're looking at. But what does this bring us to our conclusions? Well, work-life balance is still important. Student mentorship and an interest in social justice are probably also important. And gender and URM background decreases the likelihood of career in emergency medicine, despite everything else that we understand about how people choose their specialty in medical school, even when all other factors are considered. So, oops, I lost a slide there. So the next steps are going to be to do this panel analysis to look more specifically at the cooling out factor. Because I have individual level data, I can actually see how people's attitudes towards specialties change from when they enter in medical school to when they complete medical school. And then, because this was initially funded through an EM mechanism, it's EM focused, but expanding it to look at how this cooling out effect may be also driving the differences in gender and other specialties, as well as kind of in the medicine in general. And then, I think most importantly to Bob, my goal is to defend my dissertation by the fall so that the department will have to stop paying for it. So any questions I can answer about this? Yeah, Will.
That was a very nice presentation.
Thank you, Will.
What do you think about, I guess in your final model, the pseudo R squared was about 0.11.
Yeah, so the pseudo R squared's low, though pseudo R squared, if you want to, for stats dorks, is not a great model fit statistic for a logistic regression. And again, this isn't trying to fully be able to predict. It's looking at how we control for everything in a conceptual framework. So there's, of course, going to be individual level things that help drive these things that are not well captured in a large-scale secondary data analysis. However, this actually includes a number of attitudinal information about how people made their decisions, their financials, it doesn't include letters of recommendations. Those aren't available in a secondary data analysis. It doesn't include their clerkship grades because those are different across medical school. So there's some things that are difficult to control for in the model. But I think the more important takeaway is going to be not that you can fully predict who's going to go into emergency medicine, though that would be helpful. It's more to examine why some people are not. And that's really where my passion lies. So as we talked about in the first talk, there are clear differences in healthcare outcomes based on groups. And that may be, as we talk about who gets antibiotics for non-bacterial infections. Well, implicit bias has a role to play in that. And the way we try and combat some of those things is to change who we are. So while Nick is trying to put himself out of business as an ultrasound person, I'm trying to take myself out of business as a straight white male. So given that the last 3,000 years have made that hard to do, I feel like his ultrasound thing may happen before mine does. Any other questions I might answer? Thank you for your attention.